going to take up any of your valuable time today trying to convince you that higher education's got problems that need to be fixed. No one understands the problems of education in this country better than you folks here at Eagle Council. And of course, education's been a major focus of Eagle Forum for decades. Fortunately, at last, the word has spread. Nowadays, there are even entire websites devoted to telling stories about campus craziness. After decades of deterioration, culminating in last year's illegal, harassing, and anti-Semitic encampments, the public finally gets it. Even the polls now prove that the public has soured on higher education. So convincing the American people that higher education is broken and needs to be fixed is not the problem. The real challenge is figuring out exactly how to fix things. Is fixing things even possible? Academic freedom has always protected public higher education from reform, and this remains a significant barrier to change. So practically speaking, what specifically can we do to fix universities that are in many ways structurally protected from intervention by the public's representatives? That is the $64,000 question. Inflation. Clearly, inflation has changed things since the 50s. And I'm going to answer it right now. If you want to know how to repair and revive public higher education in the United States, here is the solution. You see, I grew up as a middle-class kid, and the families on my block were incredibly proud of their lawns. That's the idea. What do you think? Thank you. No, I actually do have a better answer than that. The real answer is a piece of model legislation called the General Education Act. To borrow a phrase from that influential world leader, Saddam Hussein, the General Education Act is the mother of all higher education reform proposals. Once enacted into law, the General Education Act will dramatically transform public higher education in your state. This model legislation, which I co-authored along with Jenna Robinson and David Randall, is jointly sponsored by the National Association of Scholars, by my think tank, the Ethics and Public Policy Center, and by North Carolina's Martin Center for Academic Renewal. I believe there's going to be some kind of action sheet, or maybe it's on the internet or in your packet, giving you links to things about the General Education Act. All right, so let me begin by saying that notwithstanding academic freedom, state legislatures actually do have the power to fix higher education. We just haven't realized it up to now. As noted, fixing higher education legislatively has long seemed impossible because academic freedom shields the university from legislative action. But legislatures have a power that does not violate academic freedom, a power that allows them to fix higher education in their states. That is the power of the legislature over what's called general education. General education refers to the courses that students are required to take in order to graduate from the university. Legislatures have the power to specify what courses, and even within limits, what course content must be taken by students before they graduate. With that power, legislatures can truly transform public universities. Now, we already have some states, like Texas and South Carolina, that have long required, by statute, that students at public universities take courses, say in U.S. history or in civics before they graduate. Now, sometimes those requirements are simply ignored by universities, and sometimes the requirements are undermined by allowing a U.S. history requirement, for example, to be satisfied by, say, a course in radical feminist basket weaving in the 1870s. I exaggerate, but only by a little. And lately, states like Florida and South Carolina have begun to pass new laws that mandate in much greater detail what a required civics or history course must look like. That does a lot to prevent universities from skirting or ignoring the law. Okay, now what if we were to take this idea just about as far as it will go? What if the legislature were to mandate that every graduating student at its public universities must take a course in the history of Western civilization, as well as a course in the greatest literary and philosophical works of the West, along with a top-notch survey course in American history, and also a proper course in American civics, as well as a course on the classics of American literature, and a course on the masterpieces of Western art, etc., etc. In other words, what if the legislature were to mandate a return to the tradition of general education that dominated America's colleges and universities? I love Eagle. Only I would never have guessed on applause at that point. Eagle is fantastic. You can't match Eagle. In other words, what if a legislature were to mandate a return to that tradition from the colonial era right through the 20th century? That's how long it ran. It's true that at the end of the 19th century, America's colleges and universities began to introduce electives, specialized courses that served to prepare students more fully for particular careers. But even then, most courses offered during the first 2 years of college were required courses taken in common by all students. And this practice of a shared basic education was understood as a way of preparing students for mature and responsible citizenship. So why can't our public universities restore that tradition? Well, the answer is they can and they should, and you can make them do it. Now, at this point you might object. You might say, but Stanley, I don't care how many good courses we require. If the crazy radical faculty members at my state's universities teach those courses, all those good requirements will be completely undermined and useless. Well, you're right. Very clever of you to make that objection. That's why the Model General Education Act establishes a new and independent school of general education to be run by a new and independent dean who is answerable only to the president of the university and to the Board of Regents. The new dean is empowered by the General Education Act to hire totally new faculty members to teach the new required general education curriculum. And the Board of Regents is empowered by the General Education Act to let go of a corresponding number of existing faculty. In other words, to fire them. Pardon me?
Are there any in the pipeline to teach these classes?
That should be the first question.
Okay.
That's actually the most important question. Well done. Are there any people in the pipeline who are able to teach such courses? That's the real challenge, but I can respond to that. That'll be the first question. All right, so this includes shutting down entire existing departments and getting rid of even tenured faculty in those departments. Now here, you might stop applauding and raise another objection. You might say, but wait a minute, Stanley, how can we eliminate whole programs and fire tenured faculty without violating academic freedom? Well, the answer is you can do everything I'm talking about without violating academic freedom. You see, it's an accepted principle, even by the American Association of University Professors, that when a university fundamentally changes its educational mission and strategy, it's permitted to engage in what's called program discontinuance. Program discontinuance. This usually happens when a university is out of money and they have to close some liberal arts departments because they aren't getting enough attendance there. But it's broader than that. In other words, the elimination of whole departments and whole programs. Say like, a gender studies program. And if anything was ever a fundamental change of educational mission and strategy, it's a return to traditional general education. Let me give you a detailed example of just one of the courses identified as a graduation requirement by the Model General Education Act. I'm going to read you the first semester of the mandated year-long course in Western Humanities. And I'm going to quote here directly from the model bill. Quote, Western Humanities 1, 1000 BC to 1450 AD, which shall explore substantial selections from works of first-rank literary quality and enduring literary and philosophical influence, often called great books, with readings by figures such as Plato, Augustine, Dante, and the troubadours, that to include the Hebrew Bible, the New Testament, Homeric epic, Greek philosophy, Greek tragedy, and medieval literature. Okay, that's the first semester. The second semester, sorry, I've got a frog in my throat. Second semester of that course lists Martin Luther, Shakespeare, Cervantes, and Jane Austen, and requires both classic Catholic and Protestant religious literature to be assigned, among many other things. In most cases, the model is careful not to mandate specific books, but rather gives examples of books that fulfill the mandated areas of coverage. But the course mandates do include certain obligatory areas of coverage, such as Homeric epic, Catholic and Protestant religious literature, and, say, the development of parliamentary democracy in Britain. But notice that the Bible, both the Old and New Testaments, are mandatory. The Bible is so fundamental to the Western tradition that we felt comfortable in this particular case mandating the study of a specific work. So believe it or not, the Model General Education Act actually mandates the study of the Bible in our public universities, Old Testament and New. Now, this isn't specifically religious instruction. Rather, it's approaching the Bible as a way of understanding the fundamental shaping of Western civilization. But of course, that in no way excludes a student approaching the Bible as both a deeply influential cultural and historical document and as a testament of personal faith. That's up to the student. And of course, this is just a tiny taste of the cultural and intellectual riches packed into the Model General Education Act. There's a course on the founding ideas of Western liberty, where students read authors like John Locke, Adam Smith, and Alexis de Tocqueville, a course on the history of Western civilization, and much, much more. To summarize, the Model General Education Act does three basic things. First, it lays out, in a fairly detailed way, a set of required courses that all public university students must take in order to graduate. Second, It establishes an independent school of general education within the university and makes that new school, and it alone, responsible for teaching most of the newly required courses. The Model General Education Act also empowers the dean of the new School of General Education to hire new faculty members who are truly committed to traditional general education. And third, the General Education Act empowers university regents to discontinue departments, either wholly or in part, and to dismiss professors, even tenured professors, in numbers equal to the number of professors hired by the new School of General Education. So this is a genuinely transformative plan, and we can expect it to rouse major opposition from universities. Critics will claim that mandating university courses violates academic freedom. It does not. I've already published an article citing the many precedents for legislative general education mandates. If you want to see that piece, just Google my name, Stanley Kurtz, and the following article title, Can Utah Save America's Universities? Can Utah Save America's Universities? With public frustration with universities at a high point after the campus response to the horrific terrorist attacks in Israel, there has never been a more auspicious moment to introduce such a bill. Naturally, however, given the sweeping nature of this proposal and what is certain to be major opposition from colleges and universities, passing such a bill will require considerable effort and commitment. If, however, even one state seriously advances this bill, it will kick off a major national debate. And I believe it will galvanize the entire conservative movement behind the idea. Utah considered a bill inspired by the General Education Act last year. Although it was a bit too late in the session to move forward, another effort is planned for 2025, and prospects for passage look reasonably good. There are other states very likely to advance bills inspired by the Model General Education Act in 2025 as well. I can't tell you the names because the announcements haven't yet been made public. The Wall Street Journal has already published an op-ed endorsing the General Education Act. In short, things are lining up in a very positive way. Note, this is important, this plan will not work properly unless the president of the university truly supports it, because the president has sole responsibility for appointing the dean of the School of General Education. And that is, unless the president of the university is a genuine supporter of traditional liberal education. Most college presidents, even in red states, do not fit that bill. So to truly make this plan a success, a state needs to pull a DeSantis. In other words, the regents or the trustees, the governors, whatever it's called in your state, they need to select a university president who will genuinely back this idea, just as trustees appointed by Governor DeSantis in Florida have installed as, say, the president of the University of Florida, former U.S. Senator Ben Sasse. He just retired. His wife is very ill, but that's the model, that's the idea. They also put into New College, if people have heard about the changes at New College, that's run by the former Speaker of the House of Florida. You get the idea. It's also important to apply any legislation to the right campus. Utah is a sufficiently conservative state that the flagship campus has been targeted. But in other states, targeting a less central campus for transformation can reduce opposition and increase the chances of passage. It would really only take a single university campus transformed into a bastion of classic general education to restore genuine choice in higher education to families in your state. The bottom line is that state legislatures do have the power to fix what is broken in our system of public higher education. This fight is anything but hopeless. If you're willing to be bold, and if you're ready for a public battle that will unite the conservative movement of this country behind you, then the institution that's been destroying our culture bit by terrible bit over decades can finally be halted and turned into something good. Thank you.